Close enough for me. According to that clock, it's 1:30. The October RTA board meeting will come to order. All right, agenda item number 2, approval of the agenda. I do have one slight change. I would like to move 9B ahead of 9A.
I agree with
If anybody has an objection to that, let me know now. Otherwise, 9B will be ahead of 9A, and I'd ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve?
Second.
All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It was moved by Commissioner Vanderwerf, seconded by Trustee Tyler, or Trustee Stevens, sorry. This guy, the guy in the green shirt. How about that? All right, agenda item number 3, public comments on items that are not currently on the agenda. Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment on an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to item number 4, approval of the minutes from the September 12th meeting.
I move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that was, you got it? All right, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, seeing no opposition, that passes unanimously. CAC advisory report. We get the distinct pleasure of having Reb today.
I don't know if that's distinct. Extinct might be a better word. We had our usual fun time. I heard me. Mr. Chair and board members, the CAC had its usual fun time at our meeting with some.
Yeah, wine and beer.
When I say that, there's always some healthy discussions. There's whatever. We went over the monthly financial reports, and it's an information only, so I'm going to just give the highlights of it. City of Colorado Springs submitted 3 contracts for approval. There was considerable discussion. It was finally approved, but not unanimously. The discussion was over item number 2. It concerned no PPRTA money as presented, and we didn't understand why we were supposed to give an approval for it. It should have been an information only. We tried to change it to just an information only, and some of the members wanted it to go forward. So the majority of the committee approved it, but there was reservations on the part of 3 of us. They presented some information about the Pikes Peak Greenway corridor. It was an information only. They requested on our item was item 5 on your agenda. It's item 6C. Okay. It passed. There's a little discussion whether it was 13-4 or 14-3, but there were 3 of us that voted against it for sure. 6C.
7C.
Thank you. Sorry, 7. I'm on my agenda.
You're all right.
The issue was they wanted to change task order limits from $200,000, which were just raised about 2 or 3 years ago by this same board, to $1 million and a $5 million cap with no oversight. No. And I will let the board, because we've already had a discussion, I'll let the chair have open the discussion amongst the, but it did pass. Okay? There were 4 of us that definitely went against it. The City of Manitou Springs, El Paso County, City of Manitou Springs presented 2 contracts, El Paso County 1, and the town of Green Mountain Falls presented 1. All were approved unanimously by the CAC. City monthly change order was information only. The GAP project IGA was approved by the CAC, but there was also discussion there and again, I was one of the odd people out, we're not attorneys, and we're not comfortable with criticizing the way that an attorney works an IGA. So basically, we deferred that to the judgment of the board as presented by the attorney. We will be discussing next month some changes to the way we run our meetings so we can take some items out like item 2 on the city's list. Okay? Are there any questions?
Any questions? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept the CAC monthly report.
Move to accept.
Second. All right, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, seeing no opposition, that passes unanimously. Before we get any further here, I see that we have a member with us today that we don't normally have. If you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself, and if you'd like, we could go around the table and introduce all of ourselves for you as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm Nancy Fortune. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem of Manitou Springs, and despite rumors, Ken Dre has not been recalled.
Yeah,
He is
no, I'm kidding. That was a joke.
He has been. Spent the morning in negotiations with the COG, so that's on here instead.
All right, well, and would it be helpful for you if we went around the
Yes.
room? Okay, great. I'm Mark Waller, El Paso County Commissioner.
Dave Geislinger, Colorado Springs City Council, welcome.
Lojinos Gonzalez, El Paso County, we've met.
Stan Bandorf, El Paso County, and we know each other.
Dennis Carpenter, Mayor of Rama.
Rick, how about you back there, please?
Rick Sonnenberg, Program Manager for PPRTA staff.
Jennifer Ivey, said legal counsel.
Yolanda Avila, City of Colorado Springs, and my guide dog, Puma.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yes, well, everybody forgets Tyler. That's right.
We're next to each other this
We're-
morning.
Greenwood Falls, so no. All right, sorry about that. I apologize that we didn't do that ahead of time. All right, on to agenda item number 6.
Good afternoon, Beverly Majewski, PPRTA Financial Manager. The August sales and use tax figures are $9,570,000, or $782,000 above the monthly budget, so that's the highest we've been above a monthly budget so far this year. We're $2,768,000, or 4.2% above the annual budget with 4 months left to go. On page 2, comparing to last year, we're $3,371,000 ahead year-to-date, or 5.18%. Then the rest of the pages are just the regular, like, income statement, revenue and expense statement. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions on this year's budget? All right, on to 7B.
Okay, so today I put a copy of the proposed 2019 budget in front of you, and I just noticed it says amendment, and it shouldn't say that, so I'll have that
So
corrected
you're
by
going to
next
amend
time.
the amendment?
Yeah, before we have the first one. But by state budget law, it's required that you receive the budget by October 15th, so that would be, we're in time. And then the staff recommends that the board officially receive the budget, and then make a motion to set the public hearing date for the regular board meeting of December 12th at 1:30. We'll have the meeting where we go over the budget next month, both with the CAC and the board, and then in December, the public hearing to accept the budget and appropriate the funds.
So effectively, we'll have a work session next month, and then a public meeting in December. And the statute requires that we be given the draft, the board be given the draft of the budget prior to October 15th, which is what's happening today. And what we will need to do is approve the calendar moving forward for setting the public hearing date.
do we need a motion to that effect, Beverly?
Yes.
Okay, so I would move to accept the budget proposed that was submitted to us today and set the hearing for December 12th, the public hearing on the budget for December 12th at 1:30.
Second.
Second.
Yes, Councilmember Avila.
Second.
Oh,
Yeah, we'll let her.
yep, she's got the second. All right, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, seeing no opposition, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, 7A, capital maintenance, public transportation contracts, City Colorado Springs. You don't look like Mike.
I don't look like Mike. No, I'm covering for Mike today.
Oh,
Aaron
should be on a hard
Egbert, City
time.
Colorado Springs Public Works. We have 3 contracts in front of you today. The first one is Woodman Road widening, where we separated out the privacy fences from the original Wildcat contract. The second one is non-RTA funds, but since the project started as an RTA contract using program traffic funds, we're just showing you what we're doing there for the construction, and that's for AECom to finish the final design and do some construction management on the Sierra Madre Vermejo street improvements. And then the Chestnut Bridge, you might remember 2 years ago we had a culvert, 3 years ago we had a culvert failure. We started to see some erosion on some of the walls that we did, and we really used that upstream area as a kind of a pumping station, so we'd let it fill up with water and then bypass pump around while we did the construction. So we weren't able to get topo and really figure out how that channel should be stabilized through there. So this is a cleanup of that capital project.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Sure.
Not a question, but a comment about the second, and this is more for the board as a whole. The second item, we discussed about it at the executive session before this meeting, that it's appropriate, I think, that because it is a PPRTA project that's funded, even though these are not PPRTA funds, I appreciate you coming before the Citizens Committee to advise of it, and that going forward, we should recognize something like this as an information-only session, so that people can come forward and there still be this maintenance of transparency.
I agree with that. So effectively, here's where we are. 2 does not require our approval. It's simply a notification because at one time prior it had been on a list. But it's not now not using RTA funds. So 2 does not require our approval today. We appreciate the City of Colorado Springs coming and giving us an update on notice, but does not require our approval. So I would move that we approve the City of Colorado Springs capital maintenance and public transportation contracts 1 and 3.
Second.
All right, so that was moved by the chair, seconded by Trustee Stevens. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, that passes unanimously. And what we're going to do in the months forward is when we have circumstances like this, we're going to have a separate place on the agenda for information on these kinds of items. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, just a question.
Sure.
Since the City of Colorado, this item is listed as approved as an action, and we approve the agenda, do we need to take a vote to take number 2 off as a vote?
So I made the motion to just approve 1 and 3.
Right, but
and,
did
and
we?
2 was off.
Oh, the
So there's
motion
no
included
action.
the 2 being off?
Well, I made the motion to approve 1 and 3. I didn't make the motion to approve 7A. I made the motion to approve 7A's 1 and 3. I don't think it needs to be more significant than I made it.
No actions being taken.
Right. On
Okay.
B,
I mean, I will, and
or
I-
2, I'm sorry.
It's just on the agenda as an action item, so I don't know if we vote to remove it as an action item or defer it or something. I'm just asking.
I think that we did it adequately, but thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. On to 7B, the
7B.
Peak Greenway corridor.
So what we did in the memo there is we kind of showed you with the board has approved the $3.5 million cap. I believe that's the cap for the Greenway connection with the pedestrian bridge. What we detailed out here is what we've spent today in the first table. So those are expenses that we have done. The second table is what we are anticipating the expenditures will be. So if you have any questions on that. And then the third is Carlos from the Citizens Advisory Committee had asked for just kind of a breakdown split of that new Uinta underpass with the Greenway and the Legacy Loop on how much RTA funds were used versus other funds. So that's that third table that we showed you.
All right, any questions on that? All right, seeing none, thank you. All right, on to agenda item 7C, the request to increase the task order limit for bridge maintenance work.
And I tightened up my belt, so. So what I thought I'd do to kind of start this off is give you just a quick overview of the Colorado Springs Bridge program. I don't know if we want to turn the lights down. Is that a little bit better? So this will kind of show you kind of what we're doing. I started on the bridge program back in 2009 is really when I started doing that. So the program's evolved quite a bit since then. We defined a bridge. That's one thing that we did do through the RTA. That's a policy of what a bridge is. We have majors and minors, about 440. Oldest was built in 1902. We think we have some older than that up in the canyon that have been expanded, but that's kind of the oldest one on our inventory. Newest, 2017. We got a couple that'll be finishing up this year. The longest is the Milton Proby ramp, and we've got over 50 different structure types with service lives 40 to 75 years. Half of our inventory was built in the 70s and 80s, so if you think of a bridge lasting so long, we're going to hit a bubble as we get into that time frame. Structurally deficient, functionally obsolete is a federal term, so they use those quite a bit as on their on-system bridges. We don't use that as a city. We've created our own health index, and we base that on the condition of the structure, the safety functions of the structure, and the function of the road. So Academy Boulevard with a high traffic volume would have more importance than a local resident street that has an easier detour route. The health index is very helpful for us to set up our planning effort for our capital program. We have a flood response team that goes out after storms. We do have 18 bridges that we inspect every 90 days because we're worried about certain elements. And then we've really partnered up with 2C on getting these bridges maintained ahead of the paving program. We're funded through the PPRTA. This year's budget was $5.9 million. When I first started on the program in 2009, the budget was $1.5 million. So we've really been very successful at bringing that level up to match these 2C projects where they're spending $50 million annually. I try to keep the program in balance. This is kind of some of the categories that we do. And then if you look on the upper right-hand corner, we're tracking all of what we're spending money on so that I can kind of do a pie chart here to make sure that the program isn't getting too far out of balance. Are we spending too much money on repairs or minor rehabs or program and preventative? But this is kind of my tool to watch how we're spending. The first bridge I'll show you was one we did in 2017. It's Charlotte Parkway over Sand Creek. This was our first attempt at waterproofing an existing reinforced concrete box. We do waterproof all of our new boxes that go in. This is a triple cell box. It was built in the 80s. Had a lot of efflorescence, which is basically the water leaking through the concrete itself. You see the rust stains that are up there where the reinforcing started to deteriorate. Spalling along one of the ends of the culvert. It's just getting old, some cracks. So what we did is we stripped all the fill off the top of this. Those, what you can see right there, are all the utility lines that cross this structure. There was about 4 feet of fill on top. So it was quite a lot of work. We closed the road down, had detours. Came back, this is a waterproof membrane on the top to buy extra years of service life. And this is what it looked like when we were ultimately done restoring some landscaping on top. New guardrail, upgraded that, new handrail. Chapel Hills over Pine Creek it's a box girder bridge by the golf course. We had a lot of issues here with the approach slabs cracking, the joints deteriorating. This one really rode kind of like, almost like I-25 in Rock Rimmon with that big kind of hump as you come up over the joints there. It had more of a tabletop feel to it. We had a lot of settlement issues. You can see where that whole curb line is settled a good 3 inches. and that was causing a lot of water leakage underneath, deteriorating the abutments, the girders. We had to remove the entire approach slab and joint, put in a new approach slab and joint to get it to drive smoother. We used a polyester concrete overlay. It's about a 1-inch overlay. CDOT's been using it. It's a very hard, durable product, and it waterproofs the structure with a good wearing surface. Kind of has those little tying marks in it. And there's with the asphalt. And then we worked with the HOA out there at Pine Creek to extend this guardrail onto some private property and some easements there to protect their decorative pilaster, which is their maintenance responsibility. Woodman over Monument Creek and the railroad, this was a very large project. It's box girders. You can kind of see the two structures are so close together, we just did them at the same time. We had deteriorated joints. We had some differential structural issues at the approach slabs where the rebar wasn't constructed correctly per the plan, so we were getting some differential settlement there. We needed to demo all the joint, demo that rail, rebuild the sidewalks and the approaches. That's what a new joint looks like. There's the waterproof membrane, and then the asphalt on top of it. Guardrail, deteriorated bridge rail. This was the Colorado Viaduct. It was built in the 90s. See, we had a lot of rusting, a lot of issues there. I don't think the steel was properly prepared when they originally did this project. But in order to do that rail, we have to take the old rail down, put new temporary railing for vehicles and pedestrians. We take it off-site, sandblast it, paint it, then come back out on-site and reinstall it. As far as the 2019 plans, we're getting our majors and our minors inspected this year, so we're going to probably have about 5,000 maintenance items to sort through, figure out what to do and not to do. We're going to be expanding the Cimarron sidewalk where they have that kind of that trail comes up from the new interchange. Palmer Park has 3 structures on it ahead of 2C that we're going to buy some additional service life, Union, West Bijou. Water Street, Camp Creek has a new study. And that Water Street is probably the worst structure we have along Camp Creek, so we're worried that we're going to have some issues there. Some accomplishments, we've got a dedicated funding source, which is huge. We've got a health index that we do data-driven decisions on bridge replacements. We are on pace to do 3.8 bridges per year. If you think of if we've got 440 bridges, we replace 1 a year. You're expecting those bridges to last 400 years. So we really need to replace about 4 bridges a year to keep up on that. We have short and long-range plans. We manage both the structures together and really partnering with 2C on a proactive maintenance approach. Some of our capital improvement needs, these are some of the lists for the A list that we have in the RTA. We do get we're getting some grants for these bridge projects. We're also doing some general fund. So we do go through on an annual basis and get some bridges paid for through the city, which comes to that $60 million. As far as our 10-year plan, this is what we're looking at for on our unfunded list, and also with our 25-year long-range plan. Some bridges we've completed. I could go down through the list if you want to, but a lot of these are RTA. Some of them are general fund, and some of them are also grants. Upcoming projects, we've got 3 bridges up in the canyon. Circle Drive is one we're going to bring to you in December with our plan of rehabilitation versus replacement, so you have a presentation on that. Platte Avenue, half of it's funded through RTA, half's a federal grant, so we're leveraging those RTA dollars. And then Airport over Spring Creek, that's one where we've got some pedestrian issues, and we're going to put an RFP out this fall to start that design process. And with that being said, I'll open it up to questions on the bridge program.
Well, are we just talking about the bridge program, or are you asking us to increase the task order limit for bridge maintenance work?
So,
I probably would have been helpful if you had led with the ask before you went into the presentation.
okay. Well, so we're asking to raise the task order limit to $1 million. It's at 200,000 right now. Wanted to kind of show you this presentation, to show you the scope and the size of some of these bridge maintenance projects that we're doing, some of the complexities. When I first started on the program, we would do an invitation for bid, and we'd put about 10 bridges, and then we'd change order about 10 bridges into that. So we'd do 20 bridges. And then in 2013, we went and got an on-call contractor, and we selected 2 of them. One of them's TLM and Chanel. And then we have them do these projects. Their qualifications and price is part of the selection. We are doing the renewal of those contracts right now. We're selecting those contractors, and we'll be bringing those in December for you to approve those contracts. So with that being said, because of the size and the complexity of our projects, and it is maintenance funds, so we could do a standalone contract and change order in every one of these projects, and they would not come to the board or not be seen by the board. But by doing this task order limit and doing task order base, it allows the city to create a specific task order. We are able to do a scope and a fee tied to that and a schedule to where we can implement liquidated damages if the contractor doesn't meet that schedule. So it'll be many individual projects inside of this master contract. And as far as the bridge maintenance program goes, historically, we did one project over $1 million. It was 1.2. We have some of the projects were as low as $150, where we were buying graffiti paint for the graffiti guys so that on these new bridges it looks good and matches. I was talking a little bit earlier, if you were to take if the limit were to be $500,000, there was 8 projects that we did over $500,000 over the last 2 years. And this is really a byproduct of our funding going up to almost $6 million, to where we're asking for these task order limits to be increased, and we're biting off these bigger and bigger bridge projects.
And so what's the harm in, bringing a task order over $200,000 to the board for approval?
There probably isn't any harm, but it's just a paperwork. It's memos. And I'm just trying to smooth out the process. Right now, the way the system works is I could write 5 $200,000 task orders, show them to you on the log to equal the $1 million. And I don't think that's the goal of the CAC and the board, to have us add up to what we need to do the real project. And we will be reporting these on the task order log at the month while they're still probably under construction. So there's time to ask questions, or if there's any concerns. It feels like you're seeing the information, but you're seeing the complete picture.
Yeah, Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to make sure if we were to approve this, there aren't any opportunities for any other type of secondary effects. So, for example, if we increase this from $200,000 to $1 million, there isn't some place somewhere else where something similar would then also happen, and that maybe would be something coming before the board. So this is just on bridge maintenance task orders that we're referring to.
Only bridge maintenance task orders, and we are still working within our annual approved budget for bridge maintenance.
So, yeah, and before we get too far down the road, I feel that it's this board's responsibility. One is elected leaders from our communities. We have an obligation and responsibility to our constituents to make sure that we're not abdicating responsibilities that are vested in this board. And I think that, by making such a significant change, we're abdicating some responsibility here that we would otherwise retain. And so I think for the efficiency of paperwork, it's not a responsible decision for this board to abdicate that responsibility simply for paperwork efficiency. I've been through this. I've spent a lot of time working on this over the last couple of days, and I got to tell you, I'm incredibly unconvinced that this is the right decision. And we have more discussion here, but based on where we're at right now, I'm not going to be supportive of this limit change from $200,000 to $1 million. Sure.
And Aaron, I've got to say, and you and I talked beforehand, I've got the same concerns, that I do think there is a degree of a responsibility of us to monitor these expenditures. I do appreciate your presentation because you clarified some things for me that are really important to be clarified. One of which is, as I understand it, for 2019, assuming whichever direction we go, your budget of PPRTA money for bridge maintenance and construction is no more than 5 point what million, roughly?
I think the proposal that we're working on is going to be like 5.7
Okay.
for next year.
One of the things, and one of the areas that I would suggest that maybe, if I can be persuaded, I'd love to see what the complexity is with paperwork, how difficult it is. But I'm looking at the Appendix B on the City of Colorado Springs proposed budget, which is the maintenance program. The maintenance budget is listed as a lump sum figure of just under $24.9 million. And bridge repair and maintenance is a part of that.
That is a part of that, yes.
What I would love to see, I think I would be more inclined to support this if the budget were broken down, limiting your authority to the 5.9, because I do see some reason to say we have $5.9 million in maintenance funds for bridge that we're going to use as we see fit. I'd be more inclined to that because at that point you can't spend the entire $24.9 million. But as I see it right now, granting what you're asking for at a $1 million shot, I could see arguably in 1 month coming before us.
Asking for more money.
Well, no, asking for the entire 24.9, and we're using the whole thing on bridges. So I understand where Commissioner Waller is. I'm not, if you need a final vote today, I'm not persuaded today. I am open to, saying why this kind of efficiency is necessary. I haven't heard a compelling case for that yet, though.
And from my, and I'll just interject, from my standpoint too, I don't want to put you guys in a position where you guys are trying to make a decision on how to maintain a bridge.
Right.
Because I don't feel like you guys want that. And if I bring every task order to you over a certain limit, that's what you're doing, is you guys are making the decision on what to do or not to do on a very critical asset for the city of Colorado Springs, and that's putting you guys potentially in a bad position.
How? How? Tell me how that puts us in a bad position. If you come to us and advocate for it because it's the right thing to do, why wouldn't we listen to you?
I think you would approve it.
I mean, I think that's what our constituents sent us here to do.
Okay. I know the CAC would have concerns about some of the things that we do, and think things might not be as important as we do.
Thank you. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my thoughts on this were twofold. So one of them is, we did raise something at the county where the costs had gone up, and so we also increased it because it went from a handful of issues that needed to be discussed to numerous. And so I understand that because you don't want red tape. But in this case, if you go all the way to $1 million and the threshold is $5 million, that's only 5. And I think you mentioned there's only 8 in the last 2 years that would have needed to come to us. So I don't see this being a large number already where it's becoming an issue on terms of paperwork, red tape, delays, and bringing 4 or 8 items to us. I don't think is excessive. Now, I understand the flexibility that's needed, and maybe increasing it a little more is a good idea. But the $1 million to me does sound like, well, if it's $1 million and you can only do 5, well, to me, I think I'm very, okay with having these things continue to come to us. And the other reason I like that is because I do think the public likes to know when there are some big dollar costs that jump out, and whether they're make 100% sense to the public and to us. I think the public still likes, for transparency purposes, to see those things come forward. Otherwise, they may never see it because it's just on a consent or not even up to us. And so I do think that they like some of those seeing and being notified about those larger numbers. And so I'm probably open to an increase to it, but I do think the $1 million increase is excessive for what we're looking at, I think.
Well, and Commissioner Gonzalez, you should know it has been increased a few times over the last couple of years. So I think originally it started off at $25,000, and then it went up to $100, and now it's up to $200. If memory serves correct. Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Commissioner Gonzalez's point, we did increase the limit on one of these kinds of profiles, but we did it based on inflation rates. And since we had not increased the limit for a long time, it turned out to be a substantial number. But the dollar increase was still an expression of an equivalent project from a decade ago. So we did allow for that, but we didn't actually increase the number to allow the county staff to change their scope of their work without approval. But we did do it for inflation. Just meant a lot, actually, because we hadn't changed that number in a long time.
Thank you. Well, so here's what I think we need to do. I appreciate the presentation. I think we can do this one of a couple of different ways. We can pull it from the agenda, and I would take the presenter's feedback on that, or we can have a vote on it today as it stands. You have a preference on?
I'd be curious to see if there was a number that you felt comfortable with.
I'm not comfortable with anything over 200 at this point in time. That's where I am now. I'm one member of this board.
Aaron, what I would prefer is frankly, and I'll be glad to be the contact person at City Hall for you, is to sit down and really go through this and see if we can come up with a number that, a justification in terms of enhancing the efficiencies, because that's important. And one of the things that the public does need to know is maintaining bridges costs a lot of money. I mean, that's one of the things, it costs a lot of money. $250,000 is a lot of money to me, but for a bridge, that may or may not be a lot of money. So I'm not persuaded at this point that any change needs to be made. I am willing to work with you if you want to come to me and maybe flesh out your presentation a little bit more and come back. I'd be willing to work with you on that.
And Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yes.
Yeah, just as a follow-on to that, I think I defer to Mr. Geislinger because coming from the city, he's had these conversations with you all. But perhaps another way to address this, just as for consideration when you have your discussions, is basically keeping the limit at 200, right? But then anything above 200, it could be discussed on a project-by-project basis. So maybe one project's 750, one project's 220, we're still approving it. But what happens is on a $750,000 project, we still approve it, but you don't have to do it 3 times over to get the 750. You only have to do it once.
Right, and they don't currently have to do that. They bring the full amount before us.
Yeah.
They can do it up to $200,000 on their own to get it started, and then bring it for approval for the remaining piece of it. So that's currently the
I
state
thought
of
there was
affairs.
an ECP thing you had to do.
Currently, we don't bring it at all.
Right.
Currently, we have a contract, and we change order in all of these task
Well,
orders.
it's done through change order.
So there's a change order that's approved, and it does not come to the board for an action of approval because it's maintenance funds. So the goal was to clean this up a little bit and make it a little bit so you're not looking at a contract that's 2,000% over the original contract and a task order base. So it's really, we're just trying to do what we're already doing. We're not changing anything. And we can go back to the contract and the change order and won't come to that's a decision we'll have to make as city staff and procurement.
My feeling is I think all of us are just kind of a little. I'm not going to speak for the rest of us. I am uneducated as to this whole process. I don't understand a whole lot of what's going on. I'm always reluctant to vote for a change when I'm not fully aware of the rationale and the reason and the underlying reasons. I would like an opportunity, regardless of what happens today, to talk to you. To kind of flesh this out, and I would hope that after fleshing this out, maybe we can come back and make this presentation perhaps next month.
Okay, I'm open to that. I mean, we're looking for direction.
Councilmember Avila.
Thank you, Chair. I am too. I'm with you, David, and I would like to be part of that process. And I just don't want to overlook the need for this for our bridges. I mean, they're old. The one over Circle is 53 years old, and I'm part of, they have a Young Ambassadors program there with the kids. And I get calls from my constituents all the time about how unsafe that whole area is. And there's just not a place for those kids to cross to the high school. So I would like to look at it and see if we can make things happen.
Thank you. Mr. Sonnenberg.
Rick Sonnenberg. Two things. The CAC had this same discussion, but ended up approving it, not unanimously. But they also asked for their next meeting in November to have a discussion about contracting in general. Contracts, all the jargon that's thrown around, contracts, task orders, change orders, et cetera. So I think they want to have that conversation, and I think it'll be good for them to share that with you in November. Historically, from day one, the capital projects are controlled by the IGAs, what are called the comprehensive IGAs, between the PPRTA and each member government, such that the capital contract change orders above a certain line have to come for approval, below a certain line have to come for info, capital. On the maintenance side, once you approve from back 13 years ago, once you approve a maintenance contract or task order, the change orders to the contract or task orders do not have to come to you. And this is a prelude to the conversation I'll be having with the CAC to see if the CAC and the board want to change all that process. Because on the maintenance side, once a contract or task order has been approved by the board, then change orders historically do not come to you or the CAC for prior approval. Info after the fact, yes, but not prior approval. You may want to change that, but that's the way it's been.
And if I might just interject one thing, I was not, I had struggled with the materials that were presented to try to figure out what was going on coming into this. I did not realize the distinction between the initial construction and the maintenance aspect of this until halfway through Aaron's presentation, which is one of the reasons why I think we need to go back and really flesh out what this is that we're talking about. And so give me a call or call Maxine and set up an appointment.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yeah, based on the two choices that you offered earlier, to defer this or delay it so that we can have some conversations or to take a vote on it, I recommend the former, so that those conversations can take place and that we do not vote on this today and defer it.
All right, so is that a motion to defer this action until Mr. Sonnenberg would so I'm thinking if we have a presentation next month, then that doesn't mean we're going to be ready to make a decision on this next month. So why don't we table it till our December meeting?
So we'll be bringing, in December, we'll be bringing the contracts for 2019 for approval, and we need to know the format to set those contracts up in. So that was why we were trying to flesh this out in October and November, so that it's really clean with those contract approvals. So I'd like to do
I
it.
think he said,
I'd like to
he
do it in
wants
November.
November. Well, the problem I have is we're going to get a presentation on it in November, and have that information undigested and then make a decision. But if that's, if the board feels confident that they can do that and want to do that, okay, just, know the risk you're running.
Well, and we can talk about that internally too, if we want to. Once we sit down and talk with procurement, we can figure out. I don't know how easy it is to change the contract midstream like that.
I move we defer this vote for this item for a vote in the November meeting.
And I would second that.
All right, that motion has been moved and seconded. Did we capture the motion correctly to table the meeting until November, or table the vote until November? All right, so all those in favor of tabling 7C until November, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, that passes unanimously. All right, maintenance, and can we turn the lights back on? Maintenance and public transportation contract, City of Manitou Springs.
Hi, Brad Walters, City of Manitou Springs Deputy Public Service Director. We're bringing two contracts to you for approval today. One is for capital funds of the downtown sidewalk drainage and utilities improvements, and the other is a maintenance contract for paving of the roads. The first contract is for replacing utilities in Ute Trail that have failed us in the last several months. We had a severe sewer backup there and found out we had several sewer lines that we don't know where they go to. And also the water main is in very bad shape. We want to pave this road, but we need to get the utilities done first. And according to the ballot question was, it came up as a downtown sidewalk drainage and utilities. So it would qualify to do the utilities on the capital project. And then the maintenance would pave this road and several other roads.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
You're not going to let this,
Yeah.
just, come on.
That was a second. That was a second.
Oh, my
Did you mishear me?
gosh, yeah.
I move we approve this request for Manitou Springs.
All right, so that was moved by the Mayor Pro Tem and seconded by Trustee Stevens.
Thank you.
All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. That passes unanimously. All right, Jennifer, El Paso County.
Sorry, I was so slow. Last week, Green Mountain Falls was before us. So, Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County, we have one item for your consideration today, and that is a property acquisition for West Colorado Avenue. You are seeing this rather than a reporting on your regular item because it is over $100,000. So this is the Garrigan property there on Manitou Avenue, and we have right away some temporary easements and some permanent easements for that project. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
How big a piece of property is this?
The overall property,
Yeah,
I have to,
for 117.
I'd have to get back with you on that. I don't have that with me today. But what I would say is that it is a commercial type property, and that is why it's higher than typical. So I can provide that information directly to Rick. I don't have it with me today. Honestly, my memory is not as good as it used to be.
Tyler, would you like to move to approve El Paso County's request here?
Of course. So moved.
Okay. I guess that only leaves us seconding, so.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Thank you. And I'll make sure to send that information to Rick so he can forward it on.
Thank you.
All right, 7F, the town of Green Mountain Falls. $2 to anybody that moves to approve this that's not Tyler, yeah, so.
Should we just go right to the Good afternoon, all. Jason Wells, interim town manager, Green Mountain Falls. I'm here to request your approval for the construction contract for an overlay on Belvedere Avenue, which is one of the town's very limited improved surfaces other than the main thoroughfare. So it's a really important project for the residents who live up there. My tenure is limited to the last 6, 7 or so months or so. So Trustee Stevens, Board Member Stevens can give you history on this need if you like it. And I'll leave it at that unless you have questions.
All right, any questions?
No, move to adopt.
Second.
All right, $2.
All right, that was moved appropriately, moved and seconded. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes unanimously.
Thank you all. And as I did last week, I just want to make sure that I thank the folks with Rick and Beverly here and Jennifer and Alyssa at the county for all their help because We are a modestly resourced municipality, particularly at present, so their help has been invaluable, and I want to make sure to get that on the record.
Good.
They do an outstanding job for us. All right, 8A, other reports. The monthly transit report, Colorado Springs, Mr. Blewett.
Yes, good afternoon, board members. Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager with the City of Colorado Springs. You have our report in your packet. Just a couple things to highlight in terms of ridership in our local routes system. We had a decrease year over year, so comparing August of 17, August of 18, we had a drop of about 1.5% in ridership. It's still a decline, but it is the lowest decline we've had in some period of time, so hopefully we're trending in a better direction. It's the highest ridership we've had in a month all year. On the paratransit system, our ADA paratransit service, we had an increase of about 1.4% in ridership. In our van pools, we had an increase of about 3% year over year compared to August of the previous year. Again, the highest number of trips all year for our van pool program. Projects, we've talked about the service improvements, but the balance of the service improvements went into effect on October 1st. I also want to highlight our fare study. We just gave a presentation to our city council on Monday at its work session on a fare study that's been worked on for about a year, a little over a year, with a consultant. And it was a comprehensive fare analysis that we do from time to time. Last one was done in 2012, so it had been 6 years. The overall purpose of the fare study is to evaluate current condition of Mountain Metro's fare structure and policies and develop recommendations to improve the customer experience. And we were really looking at simplifying our pay structure a little bit and also reduce reliance on cash to the extent we can and enhance equity among passengers. We did have a number of recommendations, really a bundle of recommendations. They include that well, I guess as part of the study, I should also mention that we looked at peer communities, peer transit agencies across the country. We did have stakeholder involvement. That included engagement with our Citizens Transportation Advisory Board in Colorado Springs, as well as our Transit Passenger Advisory Committee, and also got input from drivers, which was also very important. And we also talked to a number of mobile ticketing vendors in terms of the technology that's available. So our recommendations on some fares, and these are recommendations that would go forward next year. We would be recommending for or proposing changes to take effect in fall of 2019, about a year from now. But it's really for fares to simplify. We are proposing to raise the one-way ticket fare from $1.75 to $2. Hold our 31-day pass cost the same, and also provide better discounts from the multi-ride tickets. I want to encourage using tickets whenever possible. It speeds up the boarding process, makes our system more productive. The longer a bus sits at a stop, the less productive we are in terms of moving and picking folks up. And also making our transfer process more liberal. Today you can take 2 hours to do up to 2 additional transfers, so 3 rides. And you can't come back from the same direction you were headed. You have to keep continuing in the same direction. It'll become more liberal, and basically a 2-hour ticket, and you can use it in any direction. So some riders will be able to complete their trip with 1 ticket. And as I mentioned, we really want to pursue mobile ticketing. It's a great way to go. As our last customer survey, about a year and a half, 90% of our riders have a cell phone, and about 71% total have a smartphone, and that was a year and a half ago. We expect that to be expanding. Mobile ticketing is a way you can buy a ticket on your phone and board a bus, and it's simple, easy, and it's something that really makes a lot of sense. It's the direction of transit. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Chair?
Yep. Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you. Just a kind of a quick question. You know, when you have a decrease in ridership of a month or two, it's most likely not a trend. But on some of this data now, we are up to 5 months of a reduction, and I'm interested in knowing if you think there might be a trend here now. And I'll offer this speculation, but I don't have any data to say it one way or another, but it seems to me with an improved economy, a few more people can afford cars, so maybe they're not riding the bus. And I'm just asking the question if you have an idea.
I think that's exactly it.
Sure. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit last month as well. It is a national trend, and I can't remember the number I gave you last month. I think it was like 4.6%, I think, nationally somewhere, decline. And you're exactly right. I think the economy has a lot to do with it. I think the folks who are maybe borderline in between affording a car can, at this point, has some other options. I think when the economy dips, I think we'll see the exact opposite happen. We do have some local experiences in talking about Manitou. We talked about that last time with the closure of the cog rail. We've seen a decline to, I think, 25% of the Manitou shuttle. And we've had some other, we've had a lot of construction going on that's impacted some of our routes, and I think that's kind of had an impact as well. But I think you're right. Overall, I think it's really the economy.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thanks.
I
Yep.
did have a question. Just, is there any possibility that people are using alternative forms, non-motorized transportation, instead of riding the bus?
Walking, using the bike?
Exactly, yeah.
That could be as well. We really don't have good data on that to tell you, but that could be a possibility. So we make things more walkable and bikeable. But I would also say that there's good interoperability between biking, walking, and transit. It can all be combined into one trip. You know, we do have bike racks on buses, and now that we have bike share in our downtown and some other places, it really opens up the option to take a bus downtown and take the bike to your final destination. So I don't have good data for you, but I think as more people start doing each of those, I think we'll all grow.
All right.
Thank you.
Seeing no more questions, thanks. City of Colorado Springs monthly change order and property acquisition report.
Aaron Egbert, City of Colorado Springs. So we've got 5 change orders, 2 chip seal. The CNL Water Solutions is a pipelining project. And then we've got 2 concrete, one's for tracks, which increases their contract, and then Lucky Dog, we're reducing some of their concrete work coming up. So those are the 5 change order logs.
Thank you. All right, El Paso County monthly change order and property acquisition report.
Jennifer Irvin, and this one does require some additional explanation, as an appraisal, especially for a commercial, is usually between $5,000 and $10,000. But if you see here, this appraisal cost that we are reimbursing this property owner is about $28,000. If you're familiar with the Garden of the Gods RV and the impacts of that project, they're pretty significant. So this does include some engineering costs for cost to cure, because essentially the project is taking over several of their spots that they are essentially rent out or lease out. I guess is how you look at it, depending on the property owner. But so just some explanation in regards to that.
All right, any questions for Ms. Irvin?
Thank you.
Seeing none. Oh, yep, go ahead.
Just a general, when is that project expected to be completed? I should probably know that.
We are working with the contractor as we speak to get a better understanding, but what we've been talking about, and I think what I reported in August, and that was when Dennis was still here, is that we expect substantial completion of a lot of the significant elements by the end of the year, but it will run into next year. And because of the weather, and which we typically see in the spring, we'll probably really be wrapping it up about May. But we'll have better information as we finish working with the contractor.
Thank you. All right, on to 9B, the I-25 gap project update. Mr. Hall? Going to be you? You doing this?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Board, pleasure to be here. Since you advocated a kind of bottom line up front, I'm here for what was 9B, or what was 9A, and now 9B. Just want to make sure that I answer any questions about the GAP project or anything that would help you guys approve the IGA. It's a very integral part of our Package 2 funding. Then Package 2, 90% design is out right now. As you all know, Package 1 is under construction, the stretch from about Toma Road north to Castle Rock. Package 2, we would like to be under construction by the end of the year, or really the first few days in January. We'd like to be in construction on that. In order to achieve that, we are working hard to get the infra-grant term sheets and all that lined up, and this local agency funding is an important part of Package 2 as well, which is the portion of the project from Monument to about Greenland Hills, so the El Paso County portion of the project.
Speaking of the El Paso County portion of the project, we were having a discussion in our executive meeting ahead of time about exactly where can tolling revenue, like, so let's say that the toll ends at the Douglas County line, doesn't come into El Paso County. Can that tolling revenue be spent in El Paso County? And if so, where else can it be spent along the corridor?
So, we as engineers try to make everything we write and everything we do clearly decipherable with absolutely no question what the end result is. Let's just say that statutes and all, I'm not 100% sure have the same exact goal and probably not the same outcome, but it is our understanding, and our HPT has done a lot of research on this and had the AG's office help them. One, the statute that set up HPT has, because of Tabor, it can't, just give money to CDOT. There's not mixing of funds. So it does have to stay within their infrastructure. So two, geographically speaking, so the first place that it must go to or can go to is the corridor itself, the express lanes, helping widen them, expand them, improve the facility in and out of them in that 18-mile stretch. Those revenues must be used in that 18-mile stretch. Or the third option is they can be used to expand those facilities to the north and south in an integral way. So they could be used to further widen through Monument and connect into Colorado Springs, not to just jump to Colorado Springs and place, express lanes or something down there. That would not be a viable use of those funds, but to expand, to cross the county line, to put in that fourth lane, but that would be an express lane with 3 lanes, south towards Colorado Springs, and, the other way around, going north into, approaching Denver, going north through Castle Rock.
So how far north does the corridor go and how far south does it go?
Well, I don't think that there's a limit, except that it has to be, the expansion has to be continuous. It has to continue to expand. It can't put a gap and go 5 miles up and start to do it. It could continue to expand until, and certainly the studies indicate, what and HPT is working on a long range, a managed lanes policy statewide. What we're practically talking about is C-470. That would be the linkage up to the north. To the south, it's Colorado Springs.
And could those dollars be used for maintenance purposes?
Absolutely.
Outside of the corridor, or for the outside of the 18 miles?
No. Again, to help maintain, all overlays, all that stuff within the existing thing to help expand them and then to maintain that expansion. But those are the limitations.
Okay.
As the current.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's the first I've heard of it like that, explain it that, because the people are under the assumption that it's only for maintenance. So when I hear that, I think they think only for maintenance of that area. So if you're going to potentially use it to expand further north or further south, I'm not sure how that falls under maintenance. And I'm not saying I'm for or against that, but I think maybe the public hasn't heard that aspect of it being potentially used. Because then at that point it sounds more like, well, it's an income revenue source to expand versus what was originally said, which was this is just solely for the maintenance of that same gap.
Well, so what I'm describing to you is where the funds may legally be used.
May legally, right.
Okay. They may legally be used to expand that facility, that 18 miles, and then to expand off of that. That's still an integral part. The approaches, the coming in and out, that is an integral part of the facility. Now, the policy, the total traffic and revenue study that was published for the gap, the specific goals of how HPT will manage the gap is that it is not to generate revenue. It is to maximize throughput and maximize, reliable trip times in the corridor. So therefore, the rates, as that traffic and revenue study predicts, about $2, a little over $2, $2.25 to traverse the entire corridor. Again, not meant on maximizing revenue, but maximizing that trip reliability aspect.
And I appreciate the clarification, because, like I said, very interesting, but it's good for the public to know that as well, in terms of what legally can be done. Thanks.
Mr. Chair?
Yep,
Yeah,
Mr.
thank you.
Vanderwerf.
So Commissioner Waller mentioned, a postulation about starting the toll road in Douglas, but is that the plan right now to start the toll road in Douglas, or is it to actually start at the beginning of where the gap is? Because we've got a small amount that's in El Paso.
So we're widening basically right from the area where the concrete ends around the way station, and we're widening up the hill. There's various reasons, but it's very solid, and it's really been pretty solid for the entire time I've been on the project since the winter, that the place for the express lanes to begin and end is north of the county line in Douglas County. And that really just has to do with the fact that, the traffic operations, the trucks climbing and descending that hill, on the monument side in particular, the way station, ingress and egress, bus service, being able to use the express lanes. All of those factors came in, but it's very solid. No, we are designing the express lanes beginning and ending north of the county line. And I don't want anybody to believe that that's a political reason. It's not. It's an operational and stuff, but it is the right decision for the project to maximize, the use of that express lane for, especially with buses and stuff like that.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on the project itself? All right, seeing none, that,
It looks like, are we expecting a motion on that at this point?
so we just did 9B out of order, which was the update, so that's informational only. Now we're going to go to 9A, talk about the IGA.
Gotcha, okay.
All right, and I guess that's going to be Mr. Sonnenberg, Ms. Ivy, a little bit of A, a little bit of B.
Nobody wants to do it?
Yeah, Rick Sonnenberg. CDOT approached us, as they've approached the county, El Paso County and Douglas County, and asked for IGAs for the local commitment from all three member governments. And their staff member, Marcy, gave Jennifer and myself a first draft, and we've been back and forth 4 or 5 times. And what you have in front of you is what Marcy at CDOT feels comfortable with and what the CAC felt comfortable with last week. So it's before you for approval or modification or whatever you'd like to do.
Just to expand upon that a bit, if I might. So essentially, we took the draft that was provided by CDOT, and there was some definite things that we wanted to make sure were clear in there. One was that we're complying with the language of the ballot question, which was this is a capital project and an amount not to exceed $10 million. Also to make sure that we were clear about what the IGA, the second amended and restated establishing IGA stated, which was that was in $10 million to be spread over no more than 2 years at no more than $5 million in each of those 2 years. And then the third thing from a legal standpoint was to make sure that it was very clear that we were only committed up to the amount of money that we had in excess that came in. So only to the amount that we budgeted and appropriated. So everything in here is contingent upon the PPRTA budgeting, getting the revenue, budgeting, and appropriating it to this purpose. Then also, with the tolling in mind, we made very clear that this was only for that 18-mile?
The 2 miles.
Two of the 18, sorry. Only the section that's in El Paso County. The PPRTA can only spend money within its boundaries. Its boundaries don't go outside of El Paso County, so we made very clear that it was only that section in El Paso County. And we removed any references to that section being tolled, because we knew that was a sensitive topic. There is one reference remaining that uses the word toll. That is on the last page of what you have, on the last bullet point. And that is because that kind of lays out the scope of work. And having some experience with tolling, I understood that if tolling was to start at the boundary of the 2 counties, that you might have to have signage or other infrastructure leading into where the tolling started. So that might exist in El Paso County, even though that section of roadway would not be tolled. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but that goes to the number of edits that we made throughout the document.
So
would that dollar amount come out of the 10 million for like signs and stuff like that? Would we be responsible for that? You were saying it would maybe some signage in El Paso County?
So the way it's drafted, yeah, I suppose the $10 million could be used towards that. Yeah, the $10 million could be used towards that.
Yeah. Sure.
I just want to be clear. I mean, we're at about $18 million a mile over all this widening and stuff like that. I mean, it's, for all intents and purposes, the tolling infrastructure is not, what we're talking about here, but I understand. It's all one big project.
I guess the only question I had was, so right now we're up to 10 million, up to $5 million a year for 2 years. That's what we're talking about. What happens if the project comes in under budget? Would we still be on the hook for the same amount of money, or would we get some sort of prorated share of, any under budget spending back to us?
You'd still be on the hook for the same $10 million. That was a question that was a follow-up ask of Marcy, if CDOT would be willing to add a provision that if the project itself came under budget, that there'd be some pro rata cost savings to the PPRTA, and CDOT was not willing to add that provision in.
Wait, can you maybe give us a little bit of insight on that, Mr. Hall?
Well, I mean, for one thing, the project is going to be slightly, I mean, right now we're trying to get an $18 million ballot measure and $2 million of freight money in addition, also to get a climbing lane up. We're going to be very, very on the 350 and even slightly over. But, I mean, it is just not practice for CDOT. I've had the Parker-Arapahoe interchange in Denver that I ran. That project we did in the end have a significant savings on, and those savings were distributed in a prorated fashion, but that doesn't mean it was written into the IGAs to begin with. I mean, that's the type of thing that gets negotiated, in my experience, when that project is done and when we know what the final budget is, and then the parties get together and make those kind of arrangements. That's my experience on it.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
I'm trying to understand why we specifically need this language, because, the amount of money, $10 million, can be almost entirely spent on any 1, 2, or 3 of these items. Why does it have to be all-encompassing? Why does that last line need to be there? I mean, the $10 million would clearly be spent on just concrete.
Yeah, and I think we can strike that last line. I think that Ms. Ivy was putting it in as an extra amount of prudence, but I think it can be stricken, and I don't think anybody, even CDOT, would have a problem with that.
Yes. My staff attempted to diligently put an accurate scope of work together, without political inspiration to it.
So I think we can strike that.
Be fine with it. Okay, thanks.
Is that something that you would prefer to do?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think the only other issue we need to resolve is the 10 million over 2 years versus something else. And to the degree that we can resolve that in this IGA before having to make a change elsewhere, I think is important. Is that, can we make that happen?
So the way it's currently drafted in 5A, which is very convoluted, but currently contemplates $5 million being paid by June 30th of 2019 for budget year 2018, and then another $5 million by June 30th of 2020 for budget year 2019. But it also recognizes that the parties, CDOT and the PPRTA, could agree to change those funding years within that constraint of $5 million times 2 for 2 years. It also recognizes that the parties could agree to provide additional time up to December 31st of 2022 if the PPRTA requests and gets approval from its member governments to change the establishing IGA to remove that limitation. And it further contemplates that, period, done.
So here's the issue. Here's where I think we are and why this is written in the way that it's written. We're in a circumstance where our revenues probably aren't going to come in high enough to cover the $5 million for this year. So we have to then end up figuring out, I think we're going to have a discussion on this in the subsequent months. We have to figure out what we want to do. Do we just want to give the money over that we get to? Probably this year it's going to be, what about maybe $3 million? So $2 million short. Say, hey, CDOT, we did our best. This is what you get. We can try to time shift it by a year or two, but then we run into the possibility that we go into an economic downturn and we don't get it. We can try to expand the number of years to get to the $10 million, which would require an IGA change amongst the member governments in order to do, because of the way our IGA is written. So the things that we have to be thinking about for the future, and why this is written in a I don't like to use the word convoluted sort of way, but in a contemplative sort of way. How's that?
Maximum flexibility.
Yes, is so we can figure those options out moving forward.
So yeah, I
Commissioner,
hinted
go
at
ahead.
draft in a manner that allowed us with all the options on the table. So we don't have to go back and renegotiate with CDOT. If the PPRTA takes an action or its member governments take an action that allows for a change and CDOT agrees to it, which I can't imagine CDOT saying, no, I don't want the full $10 million, it's already contemplated in the IGA. So.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, if you could refer, I'd like to find out where it is in this document, the exact wording.
It's on page 2 of 11.5A.
Okay. And if I understand correctly, Jennifer, that you've tried to word it in such a way that the flexibility is added in. I don't necessarily have an objection to that. So I want to read it carefully and kind of make sure I'm comfortable with the words, and I'll do that here over the next couple of minutes. And I just want to make sure that, because of the way we wrote the ballot, it is based on revenues in excess of planned budget, I believe is the way it was worded. If that's not exact, it was something like that. So so that we might not have $5 million a year. And if that ballot measure gives us the flexibility to address that money in a third year, is that what I heard you say, something like that? Then
The ballot language is silent on the issue of number of years. The number of years were determined by the IGA change that we made for all of the member governments. So the ballot language is silent on that. It just says $10 million.
Up to
$10 million.
All right.
Yep, sure.
Jennifer, first, I love 5A. It echoes what is, from my perspective at least, it gives all the flexibility that was contemplated by the ballot measure. At the same time, it recognizes the existing IGA between the member governments, which is the 2 years, $5 million per year. I like that flexibility because the member governments can have a negotiation if so desired, and if approved, to change that, to increase the flexibility to effectuate the voters' intent, which was much broader than the IGA between the member governments. So I like this contract the way it is written. I think the contract effectuates the intent of the voters in approving the expenditure of this anticipated $10 million. So I think it's well done. I don't think it's convoluted at all.
Yeah, and I won't say I love it, but I think it's right. It's absolutely. I wish we just didn't have to be here. We could have gotten our member government IGAs right in the first place. Would have been the preferred method, but
I agree.
But we're where we are, and so I think it's necessary the way it is currently written. I just wanted to highlight that and kind of let everybody know what the options are and where we are moving forward.
I have to look at the original ballot language again.
I have it.
Okay.
Here.
Yep.
I have it.
Well,
I
have it right here.
and I'll tell you, I feel very confident that it, accurately reflects the original ballot language. Very confident of that.
To go back to that time, the ballot language was intentionally more flexible because it costs about $300,000 to run an election. So handcuffing the PPRTA handcuffing themselves in the ballot question would have just been sort of like shooting yourselves in the foot to the tune of a lot of money, right? It's much easier to go back to the member governments and ask for a change than it is to go back to ask the voters for a change. So that was the rationale at the time.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Yeah, based on the words I see here in this draft IGA, I have no objection to Section 5A. It does, as we all know, as we've just discussed, we have other work to do in a different IGA, but the flexibility here, one of the things I think is very important is once we do an IGA, I like the idea of not having to go back to it when we can. So I think having the flexibility is good.
Did you want to see that?
And there is potential that we would not have to go back to the member government IGAs. However, I think that's pretty slim at this point in time. Yeah, the 2 years came in the IGA approvals, not in the ballot language. All right, so are we ready to approve this, the IGA between CDOT and the RTA?
I would make a motion to approve the IGA.
We have a removal.
With the proposal, I'm okay if you want to have that friendly removal.
It's the last bullet statement on page 11, right?
Okay, so the motion, let me just clarify this, is approve the IGA absent the last bullet in Exhibit A on page 11 of 11, and that bullet reads, installing express lane infrastructure, including variable toll signage and tolling point equipment, additional video and vehicular detection coverage, and accompanying power and communication systems if applicable.
I'm okay accepting that amendment and moving to approve the proposed IGA.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, seeing no opposition, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Can I just?
Yep.
Nobody thinks I can't put a sign up about the toll.
No, nobody's saying you can't. But off the record, I'll tell you what.
It's just not it's not this $10 million just putting the sign up.
You got to use some of the other $340 million to do that.
It's going to cost you $10 million to put that sign in El Paso County, so
There you go.
we're going to charge for that. All right. Statewide transportation ballot initiatives or ballot measures. We don't have our lobbyist here today. Is there anybody want to talk specifically on any ballot initiative, knowing that I have to leave in 8 minutes? Councilmember Geislinger?
Well, spoke yesterday about Amendment 74 and the unintended consequences of Amendment 74. I think it's appropriate for the PPRTA as a government entity to voice its concern, my concern, as a PPRTA board member, that it is incredibly overbroad and will have a really chilling effect on lots of government activity. The example I gave yesterday is a school district makes a decision that it's best for its funds, its citizens, its constituents, and its children to consolidate 2 schools. One school is closed. It supports a restaurant on the corner. It is the customer base for that restaurant. That restaurant now has a claim against the school district. The other school is closed, and there is a arcade, and the arcade customer base is from that school, and it loses its customer base. It now has a claim against the school district. The school district moves to a location that all citizens, except the people across the street who want to use their property to open a retirement home and don't want a middle school and a high school across the street from a retirement home, they now have a claim against the school district. And so I think that that's the issue of 74 that is lost, is that all of these sorts of indirect consequences can be asserted against the government. I think I would support a much narrower, well-defined
Well, that's not this, though.
That's
not where we are.
this. That's not this.
Oregon passed a similar initiative several years ago, and within 2 years, $20 billion in lawsuits against governments throughout Oregon, and then I think 4 years afterwards, they repealed it. But the question I think before us is broader than a 74. I oppose it as well. It's what action should this board take? Should this board engage in the action of endorsing or opposing ballot initiatives moving forward? And if we do it for one, then are we sort of obligated to do it for all moving forward? I'll kind of leave that up to the board. I'm, personally just a little bit more of a, I'll oppose these things individually, and I don't think it's in our best interest to get in the job of opposing or supporting every ballot initiative that comes forward. Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you. I think realistically, obviously, we would have to address that with the full board and have a full-blown discussion about it. And since we are nearing the end of this meeting, and the next meeting is, I think the next meeting is after the vote.
Yes.
So I don't even think we've got the time frame to really have a serious discussion about it at this time in the PPRTA. So, but I do encourage people to oppose or support ballot measures as they see fit as individual elected officials.
And I frankly agree with you, Mr. Vanderwerf, that it's too late, both in the process and in the day, to address it. Mr. Sonnenberg, though, I think that's something that after the election, as a philosophical question, we ought to raise as an issue to address coming forward.
I agree with that.
I agree as well.
All right, anything else on transportation ballot initiatives? Or,
Not that I have.
all right, thank you. Which, by the way, that 74 wasn't a transportation one. Technically not right. Yeah. It's,
we could have actually.
Yeah, two, yeah,
But
absolutely.
I actually think it relates.
All right, 9D, appointment, reappointment of the process for appointing CAC members.
Simply an information item going to both the board and the CAC to show the portion of the CAC members whose terms are up December 31 of 2018, and the actions they need to take. There's three that are at-larges that will need to come through the board's process. The member government CAC members, Cheryl Everett with the HAC and Reb Williams with Green Mountain Falls, will need to come through the member government process. So just information for today.
Thank you. And 9E, the staff field review report.
Just information again, just a report of my field verification of the work that's been done in the quarter by the member governments.
All right. Any questions on that issue? On to 10, we do not have a request for an executive session today. That means that we do not need to consider actions related to ongoing litigation.
No updates. Still
Okay.
waiting for the Supreme Court.
That takes care of 11. Anything for the good of the order? Any member announcements? Anything cool happening in the town of Rama?
We got our chip seals done. It's in good shape. Everybody in town's happy with it. We had a few people at first that didn't think it was going to help until they got the full understanding of how the chip seal kind of opens up and seals down better, and everybody's liking it real well.
You should tell them that the chair of the RTA and their county commissioner are directly responsible. So, yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to highlight that on the 24th of October, there will be a community and veterans jobs fair. And oftentimes, there are construction companies there and road equipment companies that participate in that. So I did want to get that out to all the member communities. Thank you.
All right, very cool. Any other member announcements? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Almost as good as Dave. Almost as good as Dave.
I think you already know.
I don't know. I can just sit here with you if you want.
Well, no, we started to talk about it if you want to. I don't want to do it. This is just a question. Move everything. If they go over to change the IGA between the member governments, that's what we're talking about. In terms of making it more than 2 years.
I think so.
Okay. That's the extent of what I need to talk to you about.
Okay, that was pretty simple, yep.
I told you it was going to be simple.
That's simple.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Good.
What time's your thing? Is you not managed? Are you training or what?
It's our quarterly meeting.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
be voting on lead business.
Oh, so
Okay. That was the extent of it. Okay. Okay.